Tina Joemat Pettersson, Minister of Agriculture, Forest and Fisheries. There have been a lot of achievements in the last year. There's been almost like a miracle rise in your department as opposed to other things that are happening in South Africa. What do you put that down to? Why has there been this sudden change, this wonderful... I don't quite know how to put words to it.
We certainly had to reinvigorate agriculture. We had agriculture in the social delivery sector. And my first responsibility was to argue that agriculture is not only a social function, but that agriculture had an important role to play in the economy.
Do you still feel that the press is against you, or do you feel a lot better with the press these days?
I have certainly learned that I need to be more accessible to the media. And we need to tell our stories. So even though I struggle with the media, I've also admitted that there are inherent flaws and weaknesses in the way we are doing business.
Let's talk about the fisheries, because we haven't talked very much about that. Huge importance, especially on the West Coast. There are people there that are almost on their knees. There isn't a great deal of fish in the sea at the moment. How is that going to, this new act that will come about, how will that help them now? How much easier will it be for them?
The Marine Living Resources Act did not allow for fishing quotas or the rights allocation process to include communities or cooperatives. So communities lost their fishing quotas, their fishing rights. They lost their access to the sea, and we impoverished those communities. The West Coast is a very important area for our country, but it was completely devastated when those people lost their rights to the sea. If you look at the poverty along the West Coast from the Northern Cape right through to the end of the Western Cape, then you have to acknowledge that something has to be done. And the main economic driver for the West Coast is fishing. So it is my belief that communities could assist us in protecting the resource against overfishing.
Isn't overfishing not from the locals, though? Overfishing is from those that come from outside. I mean, I can think of being quite cruel about this and saying the Chinese and Perleman. That's where the problem lies, not with the locals, surely.
When we gave the local communities quotas for abalone, we turned them from poachers used by big companies as poachers into whistleblowers, because they realized that is their resource.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's the big companies that are causing the problems.
The big companies, remember, hire these unemployed fishing communities to do the poaching for them. So if you take the fishing communities out of the clutches of your drug lords, your big companies who are fishing illegally, then you turn them into allies.
Are you going to put a clause in the document that you're putting before Parliament now to change this so they can get their rights back, where they cannot pass those licenses on?
We certainly must have a clause which compels fishing companies to keep their quotas.
And now let's move just back to agriculture again. What are you most excited about? Because we've got a huge conference coming up at the end of the year, World Conference, where we're going to be featured worldwide. The spotlight is going to be on us. How do you feel about that?
The beautiful acknowledgement which the United Nations and the World Bank has given us is an honor. we worked very hard to get agriculture on the climate change text in Durban during the conference of the parties, COP17. And you wouldn't believe that it was the first time that agriculture was mentioned in the climate change text. The Kyoto Protocol did not include agriculture. So South Africa went forward and lobbied quite extensively for sustainable agriculture, which looks at climate change and the impact of climate change on food and nutrition security. Our work has been acknowledged. We have been vindicated in what we have been saying. When I was ridiculed when I insisted that climate change has to be made a critical and important component of our work in agriculture. The fact that the world and the globe is going to be meeting in South Africa, again in Durban, to discuss the impact of climate change on agriculture is a success story which we must tell.
Final question from me on this, on success, and that is the advent of more and more black farmers coming through, black-coloured Indian and so on, coming through the market. But most of these are people of the land. They are what rudely is called peasants of the land in certain countries, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. They have little or no business acumen, understanding of business. Now, it's fine to teach them how to farm, but how do you teach them the business side? That is something that are you going to address in the future?
The partnerships I've mentioned with commercial agriculture, with your grain SAs, with your agri-SA, other farmers' unions, those partnerships are critical and crucial.
They are.
Government is not going to have the capacity to train all the farmers. And the reason why we are now beginning to have successful land reform projects is because we are getting white commercial farmers to work with us.
Government sometimes is asked to take on too much responsibility, isn't it, when people should be taking responsibility for themselves. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. We have missed an opportunity to bring the private sector on board in the work of government. When President Mandela was the president, he would go, I was an MEC for education in the Northern Cape, and we would accompany President Mandela to your extreme rural areas. He would always be accompanied by the private sector. And wherever he went, he asked the private sector to commit to schools, to libraries, to laboratories. And they did. They came to the party. We have to understand that government is not the beginning and the end of our society. Government is not going to cater for everything. And this dependency syndrome has to be broken somewhere. The vicious cycle of grants in our country has to come to an end. Our intention with the smallholder farmers and the work we are doing in rural communities is to take them, more people, away from the grant system into the productive, energetic part of the economy.
Thank you. Final thing though, because I lied when I said it was the last thing. The one thing that I do want to ask you, if asked, will you stay on as minister?
The ANC, the organization that I serve, will decide firstly if I came back to Parliament. There's no guarantee that I'll even have a job after May.
Yeah, this is the question everybody's asking. What will happen after May? Because continuity, you've now achieved all these miracles. You've done all these lovely things that everybody's pleased about. And then all of a sudden the continuity's gone. Now, hopefully the great Z in the sky realizes this.
That's a compliment. Thank you very much for the compliment.
You're very welcome.
It's been hard work, but we've expanded market access. We are doing much better on skills development, and we're having more success stories. And I'm proud of that.